Hi everyone, I hope that you are all doing well. I wanted to start off this video by apologizing about our debacle with our discussion board last week. Sometimes technology gets the best of us, even if we are the online instructor. So I wanted to just say that I was sorry for that confusion, and hopefully it didn't cause too much heartache or struggle for you all, and I appreciate you taking the initiative to reach out to me and get that issue fixed. Again, I'll be really flexible with those initial posts because I know that several of you were trying to post them when we were having trouble with the discussion board. So we are reaching almost the last week of our class. So this week we will jump into creativity, which I'm super excited about. And then the week after that, which is our final week, we will be studying our special topics. I have had a couple of questions about what you're going to research for the special topics, and that is entirely up to you. I've had some students ask me if there was any limit on how many students could explore the same topic, and definitely not. I want you to explore what you are most interested in. So we don't need to be thinking about that yet, but if you are the type that likes to think ahead, I did want to mention that any topic that's related to gifted education is fair game because I've had a couple of questions related to that. So before we jump into creativity, I wanted to recap a little bit about our module on the invisible gifted. I'm really looking forward to reading those see me statements. Those have always been really powerful, and this is, even though I study creativity, I must say the module on invisible gifted is my favorite, mainly because it's so important, and unfortunately it's a topic that is not always addressed. And as you saw in this past week's case study, oftentimes when we are working in populations of schools, such as a Title I school that may not have as much monetary support, we have certain administrators who will say that they're just, quote, are not gifted students in this class. That case study was actually a very real world case study. So I worked in a Title I school while I was at the University of Georgia. When we first started some of our consulting work there were 0 people identified as gifted. And through a lot of professional development and a lot of community building, we gradually saw that gifted program go on the rise, and mainly because of a lot of work we did with Fraser's TABS, or Traits, Aptitudes, and Behaviors tool. So a lot of you did a good job on this discussion post. I appreciated how you took this from a really real world perspective. Some of you even said in some comments, hey, I wrote this as if we were in like a utopia, but let's talk about how this would really work out in the real world. And that's something that you guys have done really well all semester, is asking really critical questions about how we can actually solve some of these problems. So in terms of the discussion posts, I wanted to call a couple of people out here. I really like how Melanie mentioned establishing a trusting relationship with the administrator and also with other teachers and even community members. That buy-in is really important when we consider working with underrepresented populations. So when we first started this partnership with the Title I school from the University of Georgia, we went, and I was not there for the first meeting, but one of my colleagues was, and she always tells me the story of sitting in that principal's office, and she was so excited because they were going to start a gifted education program and a partnership with the University of Georgia. And she said the principal kind of sat there, kind of pursed her lips and kind of rolled her eyes and said, well, you're going to graduate in 4 years with your doctorate, and then we're not going to have any support. So when we talk about building a partnership or any kind of service for any type of population, it's important that we keep sustainability in mind. So as advocates for gifted education, it's easy to walk into a new situation and say, I know exactly what needs to happen. I know exactly what you need. But there's a lot to be said for sitting back and listening and sitting back and learning about the unique context of your students and how you can most effectively teach them and most effectively support them. So I thought Melanie was really thoughtful in saying that starting with a trusting relationship. Sarah did a good job talking about the importance of teacher expectations and how we have what's called a self-fulfilling prophecy oftentimes in education, where if we tell our teachers, hey, this student is really bright, they're going to treat them differently, and therefore that student will rise to the occasion. Unfortunately, the same works on the negative when teachers have that low deficit mindset. They expect their students to fail, and then the students don't have much to live up to. So really, in my opinion, the most important thing in terms of improving gifted education is improving mindset and really helping others shift from a deficit to a dynamic perspective. I also wanted to point out that Jill mentioned the importance of a positive family relationship. That is so important, also so challenging, especially if we have students who live in homes where both parents work quite late. It's not easy for everyone to get in for a student teacher-parent conference. Some of the things that I've done in the past have been more in the evening, and they've been family-wide. So I actually helped host a creativity carnival for the whole school, and it was on a Friday afternoon, and it provided childcare, and all of the family went through and did creative thinking strategies together. And the purpose of that was for the teachers and the students and the administrators and the families to come together around creativity and help see the importance of education and encourage that positive relationship. But we do have to think practically with that, and we can't say we'll build a positive relationship by email or by parent-teacher conferences when they may want to come to a conference, but they simply can't due to work or other engagements. Several of you mentioned using the tabs, which is excellent. The tabs is such a powerful tool because I love how it states giftedness in both positive and negative manners. So it's so important not to only carry these stereotypical views of giftedness. We have to keep an open mind to see that student who's in the back of the classroom reading underneath their desk when they should be doing their math work. That's probably showing curiosity. It's just not showing the type of curiosity that you, the teacher, want to see. So I was happy to see that. Tanner also pointed out the importance of looking into some alternative methods for identification. And also he did an excellent job talking of the appropriate setting for giftedness to manifest and for this to lead into creativity. Several of you actually mentioned environment in this discussion post, which is a good springboard to creativity because, as you will read, there are different types of environments that are more conducive to creativity. So, for example, an environment that promotes flexibility or choice is going to be more conducive than an environment that says you can only do your work in one way. So, the simple example that I like to give is if you do a homework tic-tac-toe board where you have 9 different assignments and the students choose a tic-tac-toe, three in a row to demonstrate their learning, but they have some flexibility in how that learning is demonstrated. Norma, I like how in this post she mentioned, let's start with some basic questions of how many gifted students do we have? And also what type of services are provided. So really starting out this conversation with what's existing and building from there. Also the suggestion to focus on young students and doing activities like brain boosters is really powerful because as we have learned this semester, early identification is essential, and that is even more essential for students from at-risk populations. Leslie did a good job being very practical and talking about treading carefully when trying to have this type of conversation. I like how she mentioned quoting some research with similar populations of students. So other Title I schools have gifted education programs which are successful. And lastly, I wanted to talk about Thomas discussing another practical real-world importance of a top-down attitude change. So it is really difficult to advocate for gifted learners when your administrator does not want to advocate for gifted learners. Like in this case study, it's not possible for Jasmine to walk in and just change everyone's mind. So a lot of gradual work that kind of trickles out of your classroom, and a lot of positive relationship building with your administrator as well. I'd love to hear more from you guys on this topic. If you have had any experience of pushback in terms of gifted education in your own classroom, I'd love to hear that and learn about how you perhaps fought back and perhaps what kind of support you would need. So that is wrapping up the invisible gifted. If there is potentially like a specific population of students that you're quite interested in, that would make a great special topic project for a couple of weeks. So just planting that plug in your ear. And lastly, I wanted to discuss a couple of things about this coming week. So this week we are studying creativity, which is clearly a very important component of gifted education. I struggle so much with having 1 week to cover creativity because I've taken class after class on creativity, and you can also take class after class on creativity. There's books and novels and movies and videos. So please just know that this is mainly an overview of creativity research. And I try to make this also very practical and applicable to the classroom. So to give you an overview of the week, your case study this week deals with a teacher who is excited to use creativity in her classroom and the surprising pushback that she receives from some of her gifted students, which is more common than you may think. And your readings are all about creativity, but also have a very practical focus on creative teaching and learning strategies. You'll notice I posted a couple of full volumes. So I posted a full creativity research journal and I think one other full resource. So as always, with those larger resources, you don't need to read those cover to cover, but some of them are just so good, I thought you may want them in your file of resources for future use. So to discuss what your assignments are for this week, as usual, we have our discussion post. So by Friday, you'll post your initial response, and by Sunday, post 2 responses to your classmates. The assignment for this week is a little bit different because I want you to tell me which topic you will be exploring by Friday, and by Sunday, the actual assignment is due. So just to make it clear, there are actually 2 discussion boards this week, and the links should be working. I've tested them. There's a discussion board for the case study, like always, and in the assignment folder, there's another discussion board. So this week, you are creating a how-to guide for a creative teaching strategy or a creative teaching tool. This is super broad, and I do that for a reason, because I want you to choose a strategy or tool that you are interested in and maybe that you have already used in your classroom. So these how-to guides are basically one-pagers. They don't have to be miraculously visually appealing. They do need to be more exciting than like a bulleted list, but if you're not super artsy, that's fine. You're just creating, for lack of a better term, like a flyer or a how-to guide of a creative strategy or a creative tool. So in doing that, and this is all on Blackboard as always, you're going to address 4 different things. So first is a basic description of this teaching strategy. So it should be very easy to follow. I'm going to compile all of these on that discussion board, so when you leave class, you will have 10 how-to guides for creative teaching strategies. So hopefully you could even print off these one-pagers and use them in your own classroom. So number 1, what is the strategy? The second requirement is an example of how you could apply this strategy in your classroom. So when have you used it, or what type of lesson would it work well in? The third requirement is a list of either potential adaptations of the activity or further resources such as websites or links to articles or even videos that have further explanation. And then lastly is a brief, and I mean brief because I know this is just one page, description of how this creative strategy relates to the research that we have done this week. So this is a fun assignment. It's not meant to stress you out. It's meant to help build your toolbox. So I know that you guys are all practicing teachers. I know we are all busy, and I don't want to give you all of this research and no way to apply it. So the purpose of this how-to guide is for you to create a one-page guide on this is a creative teaching strategy. This is how to do it in the classroom. Here's some ways to adapt it. Here's some research that it relates to. Again, that's going to be submitted on a discussion board, and I did that on purpose because that way you can look at everyone's how-to guides and use them in your own classrooms. If you have any trouble thinking of a topic, let me know. You can really do anything you want. So there are specific creative teaching strategies. One of them you'll read about this week is called Scamper. In the past, I've also had students use different technology tools. I've had students do different learning apps. I've had students talk about role playing. So really, it's your choice. I do want to limit 2 students per strategy. So if you log on to that discussion board on Friday and realize, oh gosh, I was going to do storyboarding, but 2 people already said storyboarding, then I would rather you choose another topic. Now, if you're dead set on the topic, email me and we'll work it out. But I want you to leave class with multiple how-to guides, and that's why we're trying to limit it for 2 for each topic. Okay, so there is a good introduction to creativity. I'm interested to see how you react to the readings this week. You will quickly learn that creativity is a lot more complicated than you may think, but just to give you a brief introduction of our content, when we think of creativity, the most commonly cited definition of creativity is known as the standard definition of creativity. This contains 2 different criteria. So the first is originality or newness, ideas that no one else would think of. And the second criteria is usefulness. So a lot of people think that creativity is the same thing as divergent thinking. Divergent thinking, if you've seen Divergent, the movie, it's like lots of different directions at one time. So if we think of divergent thinking, that's related to that originality piece. But it's not enough just to be original. For creativity, we also need some form of usefulness. My favorite example of this, if we're talking about creativity in the classroom, a student may start speaking gibberish. And so they're just saying like, and that is original, but it has no use. Okay, so to be creative, we have an original idea that then has use. Okay, now let me stop you because this is where I get a little bit upset. What if it is personal use? So at times we can say we have something that is original and that language may not have use for me as a teacher, but it may be useful for the student. So that's where researchers get into a big argument about the personal use versus the societal use of an original idea. And there's not really a clear answer on that, but I do always like to introduce this standard definition of creativity so you can start thinking that creativity is more than just originality. Really what makes something creative is that it's new, but then we're using it as well. So it's something applicable. It's making a change. So that's just a little brief overview of what the standard definition is. I'm curious to see what you think about this week's resources. When we consider creativity, it's easy to only focus on the creative product. But as you'll see in the reading, we have 4 P's of creativity. That's one of the most famous ways that researchers discuss creativity. So we not only have creative product, we also have creative process. So the how to, the thinking process of creativity. We also have creative press or environment. And we also have creative personality. And that's talking about the different personality characteristics of creative individuals. So there's a lot of information on creativity. I'd just like to make sure I reiterate that standard definition because it is most accepted within the research literature. But your challenge this week is to look at both the research and some of these more practical classroom strategies. So again, you have 2 different discussion boards going on this week. You have your typical case study discussion. You will respond initially by Friday and 2 responses to classmates by Sunday. And then Friday, I need you to just tell me what creative strategy you'd like to do your how-to guide on and submit those how-to guides by Sunday. As always, I'm here to help, and I look forward to reading the CME statements that you submitted earlier, or actually later today, because it's still 5 p.m. on Sunday. All right, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.